Jersey Joe is here for a two-part crossover because a lot has happened with the New Jersey Devils organization the last few days. Santeri Hatakka coming out of nowhere in the final game against the New York Islanders during the preseason. Shimon Nemec and Colin Miller. And also Alexander Holtz is this year going to be a repeat of last year. As you guys know, Jersey Joe is my go-to guy when it comes to the young guns for the Devils organization. So we have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up for part one.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credentialed media member, Trey Matthews. I'm joined alongside for the second time within the last few episodes, my man, Jersey Joe, a.k.a. Joseph Stanislaw. So, Jersey Joe, you do a lot of work for the Devils, as we have established many times on this podcast. You don't need any special introduction because you come on it so frequently. But for anyone who doesn't know, Jersey Joe is a fellow writer of mine over at Pucks and Pitchforks. He also landed a new job with Draft Pro. He's getting into more podcasting. He is currently the host of Heads Up Hockey Podcast, but he has another Draft Prospects podcast on the horizon. But in today's episode, I brought Joe along to basically talk about the Devils finishing the preseason undefeated, but we need to talk about some key young players for the Devils and have a debate because Shimon Nemec, Alexander Holtz, and now Santeri Hatakka. What's going on? Like, the Devils won their last preseason game against the New York Islanders by a score of 3-0 without any of their main superstars. And somehow, some way, the Islanders still rolled out with what they normally might roll out in a game. A lot of NHL caliber players, but they couldn't beat the Devils. They got booed off their own rink. So, Jersey Joe, lengthy intro, but I need to hear your thoughts because we have a lot to cover on today's episode.
There is a lot to cover. Like, normally it would be a 30-minute podcast, but this is going to be longer than that. Thoughts about the preseason? There's a lot of internal competition, which is what every coach, every GM. I sent you a whole directory of the Devils amateur and pro scouts that are part of that core under Tom Fitzgerald. This is what they want. They've been digging the past 3-5 years at least, minimal, to find the right recipe internally and then adding guys externally that can try and move up that depth chart and keep the guys on the main roster, trying to keep their day jobs. Unless you're like Hughes and Ball or whoever. But I'm just saying, you got to add pressure, a good pressure, that is.
So basically, here's what the Devils rolled out with in their final preseason game against the Islanders. We could talk about who didn't play, but I'll tell you who did play for the Devils. Really, one of the only main big name players that suited up for the Devils that game was Dawson Mercer. And on the defensive side of things, you had Brendan Smith wearing an A on his sweater, which, by the way, just seems like a jump scare because Brendan Smith, alternate captain on the sheet of ice, that's a no-go. In the locker room, I love him in the locker room, but on the ice, I prefer if he's a healthy scratch. But Jersey Joe, this game basically highlighted a lot of key young players for the Devils. So one of the big narratives for the preseason for the Devils was who was going to make the opening night roster, because the roster spots were very slim, but you had people like Shimon Nemec make a pretty good impact offensively for the Devils. Defensively, bit of a question mark. Alexander Holtz, he got off to a really good start, but it was the one thing that I feared. Can he keep it going consistently, and will it translate into when the games count for real? Because he was pretty much a non-factor in the game against the Islanders. And then Santeri Hatakka. We talk a lot about that Timo Meier trade. One of the key prospects that came over in that deal was Hatakka. I had a chance to speak with him during development camp. He's a great guy. He's really looking forward to what Utica has to offer. He didn't get the chance to suit up in a single game for them last season after the trade, but he says he loves the red and black. He says it's like his favorite color scheme, verbatimly. I'm not joking. So that's what he told me. He said one of his favorite things about playing in New Jersey is that he just likes the colorways. The red and black just seem a little bit better for him.
You know, sometimes a color scheme brings the best out of some people's eyes. In some ways, it brings out the intensity in their playing style. So can we just say there's something kind of a fashion statement going along with Hatakka feeling better than being in teal? I don't want to go further than that. But I'm just saying, being part of a team that has made the playoffs, it's another step in the right direction for his career.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I just have to say this one thing while it's still fresh in my mind. He says that's one of the reasons why he's excited to play for New Jersey, not only just because of the color schemes, but he says it's a playoff caliber team.
Now, I will say this. He's not going to be the type of guy that's going to play a Corsi for 50% plus type of game. He's a Corsi 40 type guy, so he's not going to be the puck, carrying guy. He's the keep it simple, stupid type hockey defenseman. He's there to be like shut down the lanes, play physical, block. And when he did play 9 games with San Jose a few seasons ago, in those 9 games, he got 2 assists. Yes, he was a -5, but that doesn't really mean anything when your team is kind of on the downturn. But he had at least a amount of over 12 minutes of ice time, and he got 7 block shots, 5 hits, a takeaway. Yes, he needs to learn a little bit more on the giveaway part, 1 to 3, but as you get older as a young defenseman, you're bound to make any mistakes. Sometimes the coaching staff is too tight on you in a different organization. Meanwhile, another organization might look at you and say, I think they flunked on you. Meanwhile, we believe you're going to be an asset to us, and we believe that you're going to be a wonderful shutdown guy who can play the heavy minutes eventually on the third line on a playoff team and build your confidence. This is a abode of confidence for his career and improving it. And even if you're the next Andy Green, that just like being able to play a simple style of game and be able to be productive will get him a long career in New Jersey or anywhere in the NHL.
Yeah, so courtesy of our buddy James Nichols of New Jersey Hockey Now, he actually put this on the X app recently. He said, I know we all want Shimon Nemec to make the Devils roster, yet Santeri Hatakka made a stronger case in the preseason, in my opinion. However, Nemec has the right shot advantage. I'm not convinced he sticks, though. We'll see how this shakes out. And then I believe a day or two later, it was revealed that Hatakka was sent back down to Utica. That was to be expected, but here's one thing that James pointed out. He said, if you were to look at the defensive impact for Hatakka that game, it stuck out more than a lot of the other players. If you were to look at his defensive production, that defensive line production, according to James Nichols, was really long. Or the offensive production, it was above average. Or looking at just production in general, it was also relatively high for Hatakka. So that final preseason game was a chance for a lot of players to try to showcase their skill set and try to make a name for themselves as to why they should remain on the roster. But for someone like Hatakka, the odds were stacked greatly against him. And unfortunately, that one game wasn't going to be enough for him to make the Devils roster. And unfortunately, he just stuck out in that case because you got to compete with Shimon Nemec. You got to compete with Colin Miller. But I think for Hatakka, we're definitely going to see him back in the NHL at some point, especially if someone goes down with an injury or if maybe Ruff wants to switch things up just a tad bit more.
Well, first off, I will say this, Trey. What this last game means for him is that moves him up on the left-handed defense side, where he is going to eventually be prioritized Like, hey, if there's an injury and Brendan Smith doesn't do well filling in New Jersey, we got someone that is young, capable of playing defense, shutting down, and also chipping pucks on net. And mind you, that with Travis Green being the offensive coach, and then you have Ryan McGill, who's been around with the Las Vegas Golden Knights and now in his second year with New Jersey, this allows him to also play a more well-rounded defensive game in that defensive system. And he could be kind of like a poor man's Nate Schmidt, like someone that could be strong defensively, shut down guys, hard hitting. I like to call him the Finnish Yeti. You got a very cold winters in Finland, but you have a Sasquatch up there, so he's more of a Yeti.
Yeah, so I think for Hatakka, I'm really excited to see what he can potentially do in that New York Islanders game. It did really surprise me in more ways than one. I think the Devils definitely found a diamond in the rough with this Timo Meier trade, because it's like Meier's obviously the showstopper. He's the main headline for that trade. But another prospect I was actually very intrigued by was Hatakka. So it's going to be interesting to see how his production translates into Utica, because like I established already, he wasn't able to play in a single game for Utica last season after the trade. But now, since he anticipates on playing, now that he's back with the Devils organization and he's here for the foreseeable future, it's going to be compelling to see like what he can do in Utica. And you can best believe if he gets off to a really good start, the Devils are definitely going to try to give him a chance. Let's move on from Hatakka to your boy, Shimon Nemec. Now, here's the thing about Nemec. According to Big Head Hockey, they put out this stat, and they owed Nemec some flowers because they did him dirty after the Prospects Challenge. They said 4 game appearances, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, 10 shots, 15th amongst defensemen, 4 blocked shots, plus 11.86 relative 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage. So what do you think of Shimon Nemec? Because here are my quick thoughts. The one thing I can say about Nemec is that if he makes a mistake, he'll make up for it offensively. Like he'll try to score himself. He'll try to get involved in the play. And that's great and all. So it's like the Devils, they're no strangers to like getting defensemen who are mostly offensive driven and not really defensively motivated. So like if you were to look at someone like Dougie Hamilton, we rave about his offense, but the one thing we're going to critique about for Dougie is his defense. The same can be said for Luke Hughes. And we saw that in one of the preseason games. Luke got played out of position, got too jumpy, and Brock Nelson, the first time that the Islanders played the Devils in preseason, Nelson made him pay. Or look at someone like Jase Case, who is lighting it up with the University of Michigan Wolverines right now. We're having serious discussions and debates, at least on the social media app. I remember, I think Ryan Novozinski put out an article about this for NJ.com over the summer, but could it be possible that we transition Jase Case from a defenseman to a forward?
Yes.
Because that's a conversation that needs to be had, considering the amount of right-handed defensemen in front of Casey. So Jase Case lighting it up for the Wolverines in Ann Arbor. But the problem is he truly a defenseman, or should he just try to transition to a forward? There are risks to it, but we'll discuss that a little later. So that's another priority. But the point I'm just trying to make is that for Shimon Nemec, yes, he makes mistakes defensively, but at least he makes up for it offensively, which is something I couldn't say for someone like Colin Miller, who Miller and the Mets, they were duking it out for that final defensive role. But at the same time, is Nemec ready for that kind of responsibility? Now, you put out an article on Pucks and Pitchforks recently talking about Nemec and his development. I know you're a big Shimon Nemec guy. I didn't get the chance to speak with him over the summer because he wasn't at development camp. I was kind of disappointed when I saw that he wasn't on the roster, but that's a discussion for another time. But what have your impressions been for Shimon Nemec during the preseason?
Me, I smell him as easily a third line defenseman, easily. On this playoff team, being on that third line is like being on the second line. There's so much skill, there's so much depth, and there's a lot of responsibility you can alleviate from the guy ahead of you on the right-handed D side. So I can see him playing with maybe a Kevin Ball or maybe a Jonas Siegenthaler or whoever he's going to get slotted with. He's going to have someone who's going to be more defensive-minded. Now, he reminds me a lot of a Brian Rafalski at a much younger age. Like, that shot is really good. And he almost beat Igor Shesterkin, mind you, a few preseason games ago. And he just makes it look effortless when he does his passes. And one of them came against, the Rangers on that pass, like almost a no-look pass. Some people have really good corners of their eyes where they know, like, okay, my guy's coming in, he's cutting. I'm just going to flick it, and then it's there. But for him, when he was winning a board battle, I know there was a missed call, but Nemec did the right thing. He kept playing until the whistle was scored for that goal. But what did he do on that play? He got in between an Islanders skater. He took the puck, stripped it from him, went from the wall, and he pivoted his hips and his feet towards the Islanders' net for Sorokin, and he got around. He had enough room for error to score that shorthanded goal. So, and even the Islanders broadcast admitted that the way he explodes is definitely an NHL caliber. And I'm not just saying it because I'm a fan of him. I'm saying it because I really like the way he plays.
But the problem I have for Shimon Nemec is that I want him on the roster. I'm just concerned about putting too much pressure on his shoulders. And also, you have to think about, like, how would the defensive alignment work? So it's like I talked about it in a more recent episode. I said, like, I see that Kevin Ball was promoted to the top 4 defensive role, or that's what he was assigned to during the course of preseason. And Ball rightfully deserves it. No ands, ifs, or buts about it, because Ball has, I think he's scored a point in every single preseason outing, because in the latest game against the Islanders, Ball was one of the goal scorers for the Devils. So Ball's offense seems to have improved immensely. His skating ability is still on full display. So that's rightfully earned for Kevin Ball. But the thing is like, remember, we got to try to balance it out a little bit more. You can't pair Luke Hughes and Shimon Nemec side by side. That's not going to work. That's going to
you can't have 2 rookies on one line, because the thing is, Luke Hughes is a very phenomenal skater and very slick and agile, but you're going to need someone who's going to be like a Hatakka, where they aren't going to be jumpy. They're going to pinch at the right moment, or you're going to have a Topias Vilen type guy stay on that third line and help out Shimon Nemec, stay on that right side, play and quarterback the offense, kind of be like a 4th forward, but be like the guy that's going to get the pucks on net, pick apart opposing defenses, stuff like that. But I will say this, go back to when Nemec was under 17, back in Slovakia, back with Nitra, and the other club, Mikulas. So what happened was he came in at a young age, exposed to the Slovak Pro League, and he really came at a good age to learn to play against the big guys early on. So he developed the past couple seasons in Slovakia, being able to score goals and stuff like that, play competitive. And then he started to get recognized by the Slovak national team, be like, we need this kid to come internationally in Beijing and play in I think he played in the Hlinka, if I remember correctly, because I remember he had like multiple international competitions, and he just, answered the bell every time. And I remember Slovakia won like a bronze. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, even after his transition to the AHL, he's learned to play a better defensive game. But once you get the taste of NHL hockey, it becomes like coffee, where you want more of it and you can't have enough of it. And you're just going to want to adapt to it and be able to play with it. So like once he gets a taste of the NHL, like first 5 to 9 games, he's going to be like thinking, okay, I'm going to pinch this way when they're coming my way, but I'm not going to stick my stick out too far and trip somebody. So there's going to be some disciplines where he's going to learn, but fans need not to scream and keyboard warrior their way to the press box.
Don't worry, there's still more in store with Jersey Joe. But before we continue, I want to tell you guys about eBay Motors because I'm a big car guy. So I want you guys to tinker with your cars as well. So passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. And now, let me tell you guys about Sleeper. So, fun fact, I already used the Sleeper app for my fantasy football season. I just picked up a big win recently, but let me tell you about it on the NHL side of things. So, the NHL season is finally here. Will the Vegas Golden Knights reign supreme again? I love the NHL, and I know you do too. Sleeper is my go-to platform for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you have the chance to win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy. The NHL has never been more exciting than it is now, with star players like Connor McDavid, Alexander Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, Cale Makar, or stars on the Devils like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier. Maybe you want to throw in Pastrnak, Draisaitl, whatever the case might be. Simply select more or less based on their stats, such as goals, assists, points, saves, and more. Yes, you heard me. Fans of the New Jersey Devils, Sleeper offers 100 times payouts. So start paying attention, make the right picks, and you could win big. So use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Okay, let's get back to our conversation with Jersey Joe. Take it away once again. Yeah, so Shimon Nemec, I mean, I talked about it. I think, honestly, he did outperform Colin Miller, which I guess that segues into the next talking point, but let me just finish my thought real fast. The thing is like Colin Miller did not impress me. In fact, he was very disappointing. At times, I forgot that he was out there. He wasn't making a positive impact at all. So it's just like the thing with Colin Miller is that, yes, he played top 4 defensive minutes with the Dallas Stars last year, but we saw what happened during the playoffs that resulted in him becoming a healthy scratch. I was really hoping that the less you ask out of Miller, the more he's going to perform in a much better aspect. But it hasn't been that way during preseason, at least. And as everyone knows, I try to take preseason with a grain of salt. I try not to read too far into the storylines. Plus, I'm not the biggest fan of preseason because of so many reasons. And I guess one of the top reasons that I just don't want to see any of the star players get hurt before the games count for real, because it's like they put all their effort into this game that doesn't count. But that could be a subject for a different time. Basically, what I'm just trying to say is that I think Shimon Nemec has earned a roster spot. I don't deny that in any which sort of way, but what role would he be given? Because I don't think he would benefit all that well of being a 7th defenseman. That's the thing. So I think that's something you have to consider. But at the same time, it's just like if he is paired alongside on the 3rd defensive line pairing, then maybe, just maybe, he'll perform a little bit better. But I think you need to have Kevin Ball right next to him, because Ball can focus more on defense and the Mets can focus more on offense. Because it's so funny, when he was first drafted, I thought we would rave more about Nemec's defense versus his offense, because I thought here was the original plan. You develop Luke Hughes' offensive game and you develop Shimon Nemec's offensive game. and then you pair them side by side on a rebuilding team, and that's something to look forward to. But obviously, that's not going to happen this time around. So
no, it's a different process. I mean, it's a good thing in the next chapter of the Devils' defensive core of hockey, and you look at guys like Nemec, where he's eventually going to learn to be a more two-way player, but then he's going to learn how to be more responsible. Like, we talk about positioning and getting in front, laying your stick down more, and he's been doing it, but he's got to do it at the pro level. And once you start getting comfortable, getting in front of shots, in front of players shooting at 78 miles an hour, 100 plus, mind you, there are guys that shoot like a Chara, Weber type players in this era of hockey still, but it's not as often you get those guys with 100 plus.
So, do you think best case scenario for Nemec is AHL to start off? Because at the time of this recording, he is still not been sent down, or is it just thrust him into the NHL right away and see where he best fits?
So, if I want to play very safe, I would just put him in Utica on their first line, and then he would just play a quarter of the season there, and then he gets called up. But me, I want him to have that sip of coffee right on the third pair. So you kind of have that standard for him where he's like, okay, I got a taste of this. I'm going to work towards this higher standard. You got to set a bar for this player to reach. And if they don't get a chance to reach it, what are they supposed to reach?
That's a good point. So I wouldn't mind, honestly, seeing him on the opening night roster. I wouldn't mind that. I'm not against that at all. I just want to make that perfectly clear. In fact, I talked about it in one of my more recent episodes, but it's just like, thinking about this logically, I just don't want to make him uncomfortable. That's the thing.
No.
Like, there's no reason to rush him. But I must say, he's really exciting me because during the Prospects Challenge, he appeared in 2 games and he had 2 assists. And then once again, 4 preseason games and he had 4 points. So we're talking about in 6 NHL type like simulations, he has 6 points. He's a point per game player essentially. So yeah. I know it's a small sample size, and you want to take that with a grain of salt. Right. Like I said, don't read too far into it, but it cannot be ignored. So once again, 2 Prospects Challenge games, and he finished off the challenge with 2 assists, and then transitioned to the preseason, 4 game appearances, 4 points.
And what has to happen is that Tom Fitzgerald has to think to himself, if I was his age still and I was a defenseman, I would hope that I would get to be on the opening night roster and getting to pick the brains of Ryan McGill and learning to just play NHL caliber offense, just picking the brain of Travis Green, running the power play and the offense. You want to learn those nuances, whether he plays 5 games or plays a whole season. You want to learn to play that Devils offensive defensive scheme. And that way, Schmid or a Vanacek gets used to you being around. It's kind of like when you have that new little puppy. You want that puppy to get accustomed to being around the family, so that way they know your ins and outs and they know that they're comfortable with you. So really, when you have Nemec and Luke Hughes, there are these young puppies going around, and they're going to eventually be part of some special like family. And this Devils roster of really good players is really much a family.
And we're going to have to leave it there for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed my part 1 discussion with Jersey Joe. Part 2 will be posted tomorrow. We're going to talk more about some young players that could have pressed for the Devils come the regular season. And we're also going to talk about the possibility of swapping Seamus Casey from a defensive role to a forward role. Will he be a center? Will he be a winger? Because there is a logjam of right-handed defensemen. and maybe KC will be better suited just trying to focus more on offense and less on defense. But that's for tomorrow's episode. As I do to close out every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Once again, be on the lookout for part 2.